The photograph is a powerful storyteller. A single image has changed the attitudes of millions of people. Attitudes toward war and the soldier, toward civil rights, toward the worker, toward the starlet, toward the millionaire, even toward the bomb. One magazine presented all of these photographs and thousands more. A magazine that began publishing on November 23, 1936. That magazine was Life.
To be in Life was the dream of every American and European, maybe even, to be in Life, because Life belonged to the American life. There was no person in the backwoods or anywhere in America who didn't know what Life magazine is.
There probably wasn't an event that took place anywhere in the world where anybody ever got there to cover it, where we weren't. And we were proud of what we're doing. A big thing about Life's success was the pride of the people who made the pictures, but not just them, but the editors. And when people said to Life photographers or to editors, where are you from? And they said, I'm from Life. They said it with pride.
We thought that Life ran the world. That was the thing about Life magazine. It spoke for the country. We were telling people things that they couldn't get any other place.
Shipped into Denver each week by the fastest trains from Chicago come the thousands of copies of Life Denver demands. Today they arrive on an 18-hour schedule, guaranteeing Denver the same editorial dispatch as Washington, New York, and Chicago itself. The moment the Burlington streamliner grinds to a halt, Life's distributors go into action.
I remember very distinctly when it hit the newsstands, because I was waiting to get it at the newsstands. It had been a lot of advance publicity, of course. I grabbed a first copy that dropped on the newsstand down under the Commerce Trust Building in Kansas City, where the top floor I was the news editor and sports reporter and general handyman for a very small radio station. And it smacked all of us as being something important right at the beginning.
People couldn't wait to get their hands on it every week when it came out. People lined up in the drugstores, bribed people at the newsstand to hold Life for them because there weren't enough to go around. Everybody wanted it. Everybody loved that, looking forward to Friday when Life magazine came out.
Boy, I read it when I was going to college down there, 38, 39, 40 down there in Florida. We couldn't wait to get Life magazine and we could see all those sinful parties and all that action that was going on. I don't know who else read it. Everybody read it. But I know that I read it, and the idea that one day I'd be working for this fantastic thing was impossible to believe. It was a madman's dream.
When I started in Life, the three most exciting things in the world was race Grand Prix, be on operations with a Legion, be a Life photographer. I never raced Grand Prix. I was with a Foreign Legion, and I was a Life photographer.
These were the days before television. In the 30s, most Americans had not traveled more than 500 miles from their hometown. Most Americans had seen very little of New York, Boston, never mind London, Paris, Rome, and all the rest of the world, and the plains of the Sahara. So here was a vast audience just waiting. I think the other reason, of course, was that it was primarily pictures. photographs, not text. And there's something about pictures that is very compelling.
That means a heck of a lot to somebody in Keokuk, Iowa, see. But he hadn't seen it. Most everything we did in those days had not been seen. There was no television. And you can be damn sure newspaper men weren't going to shoot this sort of thing. They just covered news, usually head and shoulder portraits. There wasn't any effort to have mood in a picture.
The whole thing is a picture must have impact. Free pictures play tremendous importance in this world. One was that little baby crying in a railroad station in Shanghai, and that really got people. The other one is Bob Capper's Spanish partisan shot and falling. And the third one is this Frenchman crying. Do you remember that picture of a crying Frenchman? You suddenly had a sense of defeat, you know, the horror, the grief. This little baby obviously sitting in the middle of his whole station blown up crying. You figured, my God, what's happened to Papa? What's happened to Mama? What's happened to him?
This is something life did better than anybody in the world. It's highly serious. That's serious war. And the photographer is probably being shot at, and he had to get ahead of the other head of this, probably the lead man. He had to be ahead of him. Then he got to get composition, all the technical things. When you're scared to death and the bullets are flying all over the place.
There, of course, is always the question about what motivates a photographer or a reporter who goes into places that are threatening, whether it's a revolution or whether it's regular combat or whatever area it is. How does he do it? And the answer is simple. It's simply that one feels that he has a responsibility to cover the events of his time, that he has a strong feeling about this is a moment of history that should be recorded, and that's what keeps me in here. I know that when I was in combat a number of times, I have said to myself quietly, what am I doing here? And I've always been able to argue myself into continuing with the thought that this is my place and time.
What is a common denominator is when it's tough is fear. And I think I may have met only one man who suffers no fear. He's probably crazy. Everybody has fear. And a question of fear is sort of surviving and doing something even when you're scared. But you know, courage takes a toll. I mean, you know, after a battle, you can be in an awful mess. I had nightmares for years. I mean, I would wake up for years, and if I talk about it, I'll probably have them tonight.
There are deep moments when one takes pictures and when one finds it difficult to stand away from it. One of the series of stories that I've made over and over for years has been refugees. The fleeing Korean refugees, the Chinese fleeing the communist forces. I don't see how anybody can operate a camera, can watch this and take pictures of it and not feel deeply the sufferings of these people. It's a tearing circumstance, a very deep, agonizing circumstance.
Nobody gets blasé. You know, men who've been in war can be wounded without having suffered a wound. I think a lot of our veterans, this has been problems. You see so much. You can see too much in life. At the moment of a signing of a truce in the old city, they actually needed my fountain pen. He didn't have a fountain pen. I gave Lent my fountain pen. And I nipped in and did this neighborhood which looked exactly like Fiddler on a Roof. It was these old little houses. They were there, they were packing, had no destruction. And then I returned there 24 hours later, and this had been looted and burned. So pictures taken from roughly the same place. 24 hours later shows you what destruction was. The Arab rushed in thinking they've got gold in the carpets. They were just poor people, but you know, the Jews, a lot of gold, ripped everything, burnt everything. And looting is insane. I mean, I saw them break doorknobs off. They would loot in a way that you destroyed. You had no value left. we had extreme excitement. You know, you knew when all was going well because the story was exciting, you knew the pictures were exciting, and, you know, you lived in this sort of sense, and you knew you had it. And by the time, you didn't even have to look at them, you knew you had the pictures. But it's still a terrible thing to see, like, a little girl running down a main street, you know, the whole town in flames, running around looking like a little animal, you know, her teeth out, she's so scared. And you know what really scared this little girl most? She had lived in a ground floor of a little house in the old city. They move her to the new city, they put her on the third floor of a building, and she's scared. She's never seen stairs before. She doesn't know what to do with stairs. See, she's been through all of this, but what really scares her are the stairs.
The most exciting story I've ever been on is probably unique in the field of coverage. It was the day that I covered the liberation of my own prison camp in the Philippines. After more than 2 years as a prisoner of the Japanese, I got out, was repatriated, rejoined the American Armed Forces in the Philippines, and that day was with the flying squadron that broke through the Japanese lines into Manila, and I followed into the lead tank. It was named Battling Basic, and pushed down the gate, the fence of my prison camp, and went in and liberated the camp. There were between 4,500 to 5,000 people in that camp. Many of them were very close to starving to death. Many had starved to death. And when we broke into the big house, and first the prisoners didn't know who we were. They thought we were Japanese who were breaking in there. Finally, it was dark, someone said, if you say you're an American, if you are an American, put that flashlight on yourself. And I put the flashlight on myself and said, I'm Carl Maidans. And a roommate of Shelley's screamed and said, my God, it is Carl Maidans. And Life magazine that week used a headline across 2 pages with my pictures. The headline read, my God, it's Carl Maidans.
The life photographer brought real class to the business, and obviously was his own man or woman, because so many of them were the best. Margaret Burke White, of course, but clearly they had a mandate from Life magazine that they were the bosses, that they were shooting the story, that the reporter was going to come along later and fill in whatever was necessary and cut lines, but as far as the story goes, it was theirs. And they showed this attitude from the beginning of real arrogance, if you please, that they were something special and something different.
You think in the early days of everybody, all the newspaper photographers, I don't want to downgrade because we hired an awful lot of newspaper photographers. They just moved down to a different camera size, and they got more imaginative. But they all line up in a little semicircle and shoot what's going on, shoot right at it. Life photographers shot what they weren't. They went around behind the guy.
When Roosevelt died, Wilson Hicks called me and said, get to Warm Springs any way you can. This was in the afternoon. I decided to get in my car and just drive, and I drove all night and got to Warm Springs early the next morning. And when the caisson came by with the casket on it, the Secret Service lined all the photographers up. There must have been, 50, 75 photographers. Just, they protected the president as though he was alive. That's the way they think. I was standing there jostling for a place, and I heard an accordion playing behind me, and I looked around and I saw Graham Jackson, this petty officer of the Navy, and here he was playing with tears rolling down his cheeks. And I thought, my God, what a picture. And I turned around, I had a Leica, it was a very quiet camera, and just made 3 or 4 shots because I didn't want to attract the attention of the other photographers of what I was doing, because they watch Life photographers. And none of them paid any attention, and that's how that picture came about.
Well, now this is a sample of the way we had to photograph in Washington. Because of the dailies, and we were a weekly. We had to get something different. Now, at the time this was taken, someone was being thrown off the stand for not being polite to the senators. And I remember the writer screaming at me, come back, they're throwing him out. And I thought, no, here's my picture. And they were reacting and trying to see, because they had put these big stars all the way in the back.
When I lecture sometimes to college students, I pose them a question. I suppose you had one exposure left, and you were sent on an assignment where a man had been murdered by his wife. And she was on one side of the room crying, and he was lying covered with a sheet with the blood on the other side of the room. Which shot would you take? And a lot of them will say, oh, of course I'd take the murdered man. But I know that I would have turned my camera off that one last exposure on the grieving woman standing in the corner. That photograph meant more to me.
With the civil rights movement, hadn't started yet. And I was given a story to photograph a singer named Billy Eckstine. And they said, photograph the sound of his voice. Well, he happens to have a sensuous, deep voice. And I think I did that. But I also got a photograph of a fan's. I was very thrilled, and I showed it to one of the editors, and they were very troubled. And then I heard from Mr. Luce 2 words, run it.
The effect that Life and its coverage had on the American public was one of making controversy acceptable. A willingness to show both sides. A willingness to, I think it had a freeing effect on society and on publishing in general. Controversial, yes, but lively.
It had a profound effect on what people thought, and it turned them, and I think it was the greatest contribution to the end of, or as much of an end of segregation as we've accomplished. It was greatly due to Life magazine.
Well, can you tell us, Mr. Luce, Life's actual philosophy?
Well, if I should put that in a word, I'd say that my associates and I believe in one thing. We believe that human life has a purpose, and our job is to show individual people and nations working out that purpose in freedom and toward justice for all.
George Scadding covered a story in Baltimore, Maryland, one of the first days of school integration. The local minister, 2 of the school teachers, had volunteered to drive home from school some black students who were petrified by what they had experienced that day. And when you look at the expression on the faces of the white people standing on the sidewalk, you know why they were petrified and in fear of their life.
This is a story on the black school in West Memphis, Arkansas. It came to the attention of Life magazine because of a crusading newspaper publisher who was outraged because the school system had built more classrooms than were needed for white children, equipped them with typewriters, they had gleaming water fountains, and the black children all went to school in a Negro church, black church, with a potbelly stove, no running water, no bathroom. This mob of children all in one room, one teacher. The picture ran in Life showing the disparity in the situation, and it caused a black school to get built. Being a Southerner, they expected me to understand and to show it in a nice light, or whatever they considered a fair light. They didn't consider what Life did a fair thing at all. They referred to Life often as that communist paper, magazine, liberal, nigger-loving, magazine. You still work for that nigger-loving magazine? Yeah, I still work for that nigger-loving magazine. I sure do.
I think Life's coverage of the civil rights movement, which was very, very extensive, is based on two things. One, of course, it was a tremendous news story. The whole civil rights movement was news. Life was a news magazine, so of course we covered it. But I think beyond that, there was a real conviction on the part of the editors that this was a just movement. And I think that did indeed influence not so much the kind of pictures we took, but the space and the play we gave to photographs.
I don't think that simply words could ever have aroused the emotions of the American people as much as seeing the confrontation of the police and the militia, of whatever form, sheriffs, and the blacks, as they attempted to assert what were simply the minimum human rights for a dignified man. No, that consciousness, I don't think, could ever have come to the American people, probably without pictures.
The camera itself did not give me any particular courage to go into places that sort. It was, I felt the need for me to somehow or another use humanity to get people to become aware of how people suffered. That was what drove me into it. Not to get a beautiful picture, or not to get a great picture, or anything of that sort. It was always the need possibly to befriend an impoverished family, or to help a poor boy, a poor girl, to expose something to the public that I felt was being hidden. As long as the camera was on the right side, I felt that I should be there working away with it. I was sent to Brazil to do a story on poverty in general. So I found this little boy who was struggling up the hill with a 5-gallon bucket of water on his head. I was sitting underneath a jacamendo tree or something of the sort, and he smiled at me. I smiled back at him. He was a beautiful little kid, but death was all over him. I could see he was dying. And he told me himself that he was dying, and he didn't really care. He really wanted his brothers and sisters to be taken care of some way, someday. I did the story on Flavio. I stayed there 3 months with him, lived up in the shacks with him on top of the mountain. And when the story was published, the last line in the diary said something to the effect that Flavio told me goodbye today, and he asked me if I was coming back to the favela to see him. And I lied and said yes, because I would never go back there. I'd never seen such poverty in my life. And in came thousands and thousands and thousands of letters. In came, in less than 3 weeks, over $30,000. And Life magazine says, you got to go back and get that kid. And there was a Jewish clinic in Denver, Colorado, said if I brought him to them, they would save his life. The doctors in Rio said, this kid won't live another 6 months. I said, I'm going to take that chance. And what happened was that Flavio lived. Not only that, when I went back just a few years ago, I was in Rio, and I said, my friend Flavio, he's always writing me letters, even till today. And I went to see him, and by this time, Flavio had his own house, had 3 lovely little children, and just named one after me. I never direct people at all. I hung around and waited for a week before I used my camera, simply to convince them that I was a friend of theirs, that I wanted to help them so much. So eventually, one of the kids says, when are you going to bring your camera? I said, one of these days. I let them play with my camera. One of them broke one of my cameras, but it didn't matter, you know. The whole thing was to make the family honestly feel that you were a part of them, and for you to honestly feel that you were a part of them. Because they know, a child knows, when you're there just to exploit them. And if you're there to exploit them, you're not going to get much. I don't care how powerful you are.
They took my word that I will not take pictures which they object. They trusted me. The teenagers trusted me. This is why I got along with them. Then they showed me the newer thing. They weren't afraid that I will criticize them and say it shouldn't be like that, or don't do that, or whatever, you know.
This is the young teenage suburbia. Kids sucking away at sodas, and the little girl in the background looking out of the corner of her eye at the boy that she's charming. I don't think Nina Lean was touched by anybody else in this particular get inside the minutiae of how people looked and behaved in all levels of American society.
Now, there were sometimes people were not aware of things, like in this, you said, I think it was a teenage girl story, or a teenage boy, no, a teenage girl, a teenage boy, teenage girl, the club, teenage, I already forgot, too many teenage. Now, I think teenage girl story, they were twins, boy and girl, and I was waiting for them to take pictures, and he said, she's on the phone. I went there, and there she was sitting, and there were not 1 minute where she kept her position the same. One foot went up, one down, one she changed the position. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Q, truck on down, Big Apple!
The 50s, with the election of Eisenhower, became probably the most relaxed period that we've had since World War II, really. Eisenhower's intention was that we should try to settle down to some nice, quiet American pursuits and not rock the boat. And it was time for us to ease off a bit. And he accomplished that. The country was pretty quiet during the 50s.
There was an innocence, I think, about those days, a belief somehow that everything was basically some
America, or documenting Middle America in a kind of a split vision, as best I can remember it. It was a foreign land to many of us, but nevertheless we were intensely interested in it. We were sympathetic to it and respectful of it and profoundly moved by it very often. What we tended to put down more were the pretensions of people. I remember, somewhat to my dismay now, doing a really hatchet job on the ladies' club in Washington, D.C. We laughed at them, but I don't think we would laugh at a hog farmer in Kansas.
I needed a picture of the whole family, and what fascinated me that the portraits behind are really the same faces. If you see the boys, the standing men, and the portraits in the back, they are the same faces. The ancestors look exactly like they. They knew what I'm taking. I never stole pictures, you know. I thought it's unfair. If they give us permission to take pictures, I thought it's unfair to do them in bad lighting or in something negative. If I took negative, I explained them why I needed the negative part. I mean, that not all in life is always roses. There were few life photographers, women, but it was very hard work. Why other women didn't do it? Burke White worked very hard.
There's no such thing as typical among photographers. They're the most thorough individualists I know, and none more so than the one who took life's first cover in photo essay, Margaret Burke White. She has lived a dozen lifetimes, one of them crowded into 2 months, starting in December 1942.
When the war started and America got into it, I was accredited to the Air Force. And I went over to England with the first of the B-17s. And, I took ever so many pictures, of course. I took the crews and I took pilots and B-17s. But finally, I decided that taking these subjects on the ground wasn't enough. I would really have to go on a bombing mission. And I couldn't seem to get the brass to say yes. And I kept on pleading with them because I felt that I had to go on at least one combat mission, that was the very heart of the Air Force story. When we reached North Africa, General Doolittle said, "Maggie, do you still want to go on a bombing mission?" And I said, "Oh, you know I do, but I don't want to make a pest of myself, begging you people all the time." He said, "Well, you've been torpedoed, you might as well go through everything." And he reached for the telephone and called the 97th Bomb Group. They were stationed then in the Garden of Allah in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and he told them I had permission. It was decided that I'd photograph the actual bomb run from the waist gunner's window. I didn't know until later the boys had bets on me. If we were attacked, would I knock out the waist gunner so that I could take pictures? Or would he knock me out so he could shoot his machine guns?
Margaret Burke White is a perfect example, I think, of what it took to be a great photographer. She had a very good eye. She could see a face, and just 5 seconds after seeing the face, she would turn to me on a story and say, "Find out who he is. We want him in the story. I don't know why he's going to be in the story. Figure out some reason, because I want to photograph that person." She had tremendous tenacity. This is not all good. She would take a picture over and over and over again to the point of absolute boredom, especially of me working with her, but also of the people who had to sit still for her. And at the end of one of these very trying photo sessions, I asked Peggy, when we had packed up the camera equipment and left, "How can you ask people to go through a pose like that for as long as you do it?" And she said, "The reason is I can always get away with it because they see how hard I'm working, and they are then willing to help me get what I want."
I don't know what this picture is. It just happened to be the first picture I made in Los Angeles. When I came out there, the first day I was there, they were two showgirls. They were in some Western, and I'm trying to figure out some picture, and this is known, again, as a page in two halves on little girls, and this was my opening picture, and I thought it was rather good. They didn't believe a word we said out in Hollywood. I mean, New York is New York, and they're here, and we're there, and we had a war on all the time about trying to get something in out from the West Coast. That's that neon culture, you know, and all that. Anytime you wanted to get a movie star on the cover, we had already done them. I did the world's best pictures of Debbie Reynolds ever when she was a little schoolgirl out in Burbank, California. Prettiest, cutest, sweetest, marvelous thing you've ever seen in your life. We couldn't get her on this magazine, so we didn't know who the hell's she, you know? And the press agent, when they got that word, they just flew her into New York and walked her up on the 30th floor. She did a little dance and charmed all those editors. And Halsman just happened to be there. And he sat her in the window and snapped a picture and got her in, because we had this constant battle with New York about Hollywood. We didn't even get Martin and Lewis in for 5 years.
The relationship between photographer and editor was a very uneasy one. The photographer, of course, always felt that his pictures were being underused. A 2-page story that he'd worked on for weeks and just sweated blood on would just kill him to see it cut down to 3 or 4 pictures. Nevertheless, we depended, of course, on the photographers to help us understand exactly what they were trying to do. We had the power, but we also depended on the photographer to tell us a lot of things about what he was thinking about and what he was trying to do when he made a picture. The airbrush was a powerful instrument on Life magazine, and there was a man named Matt Green who sat out in the layout room, and he welded an airbrush. He was called locally by us in the offices the nipple eraser, and he did. He got rid of hundreds and hundreds of nipples and other unsightly blemishes and marks and things of that sort. He changed cleavages and raised the breast line of dresses and things like that.
The whole idea was to keep your nose clean. You see, you didn't get too cozy with those movie stars. You told your jokes and you charmed them. You did this and that, and you took them to lunch and this and that. But you didn't get too close to them because they're mean as snakes. If the picture didn't run, boy, you're dead, you know, like that. Every story that we did in California, we had to get some goofy angle on because they wouldn't take us seriously. We were supposed to supply the back of the book and all that nonsense. And we were doing the ultimate essay on Las Vegas. We opened up the Dunes and the Moulin Rouge in 1 week. So we go up there to do it, and everybody and his dog was there. And all of these things, and the Noel Coward, of all people, was playing the Desert Inn, and nobody knew who the hell he was. Wilbur Clark says, who the hell's this Limey I'm paying 30 grand a week to? I'd never heard of him. We wanted to picture mad dogs and Englishmen stand out in the noonday sun. We'd already thought of all the other things that we could do with him, you know, take him down to Glitter Gulch, you know, down in the main street with all those lights, and everybody'd done that. And we wanted him out in the noonday sun. The trouble is, he didn't get up till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so, but we approached him, and he loved it. And he says, where is it, dear boy? And I said, it was just out here, Mr. Coward, but it's 18 miles, to tell you the truth. And so, to get him out there, we got an air-conditioned Cadillac and filled it in the back with a wash tub full of booze. I mean, gin and tonic and beer and grapefruit juice and everything cold, with a sea of ice cubes. To get him, because the temperature was 118 degrees that day. And We got him out, and he was in his bathrobe, and his dresser was with him, and he had his tuxedo, and we got to this desert. And he says, "Splendid, splendid, dear boy, lovely idea, Grant." And he was sitting in the back seat in his underwear this whole time, boozing it up on gin and tonic. And we got him there, and I shot this in 5 minutes. I shot one roll on a Rolleiflex. I stood up on the Cadillac on the hood and shot, and he thought it was marvelous. He thought and he told us tales all about it. And we said, "How did you write that thing, Mad Dogs and Englishmen?" And he said he was on a train from Bangkok to someplace. And some rotten little researcher in Life magazine looked at that picture and said, "Well, it doesn't look like noonday to me. It's a very long shadow, it looks like," and then shot it down. We got a picture, we got it in there, but they blew the caption. They didn't understand it. Everybody in California panics. You know, you could drop a string of Chinese firecrackers out there and all those nuts out there would go crazy. And when they threat of the atomic bomb and all this, because they were shooting off those bombs over in Las Vegas all this time, and you could see the flash of them. If you cared to, at about dawn, it lit up the entire skyline of Los Angeles, you know, and Las Vegas is 300 miles away. But they were shooting all those things off in Frenchman's Flat, and so somebody got the idea of building bomb shelters, you know. And they came up with 100 different designs, you know, air-conditioned, and it got to be sort of a cult thing, you know. It's like instead of a swimming pool, you build a bomb shelter. And you could get a loan from the Bank of America. So everybody was building bomb shelter and having bomb shelter parties and all that. So that was the whole idea. That was the thing to do, and it was no more serious than that. See that one? That looks up, I mean, it's not even underground. It's not even underground, that thing, you know, it's above the ground. And they didn't want it, first of all, it's underground. They'd had to air condition it and put in plumbing and various other things, you know, and stock it with food. But they had great atom bomb parties out there. Great fun. This picture is a model, a mannequin who set out in Disaster Village in Frenchman's Flat. When they shot the bomb off, they put up every known kind of house, every structure. It's like the Three Little Pigs, you know, all that sort of stuff. And they put out all these mannequins with various different kind of clothing, wool, cotton, polyester, and they put them up there, and this wasn't too far away.
From a news knob on the Yucca Flats of Nevada, the world today, that portion of it that can be reached by television cameras, saw the 33rd atomic explosion in the atomic era of man. This is Walter Cronkite speaking to you from these Yucca Flats. That is the scene to the east over those hills. The sun rose this morning some 15 minutes after the blast itself went off. And the sun must have been embarrassed by the brilliance of the atomic explosion. Some 1 million degrees centigrade was the heat inside the fireball of this atomic blast this morning, and it dimmed the sun as it burst over the Yucca Flats here.
I was going to Korea for CBS, and instead CBS acquired a television station in Washington just at that moment. So they threw me into the breach because everybody else was busy, really. Everybody else had commercials on radio or had gone to Korea already. And I was a new man on the block, and they just said, "Here, you go do this thing on the side." And it worked pretty well. But as soon as I got there and into it, I just realized and felt that this was the medium of tomorrow.
We went over to the NBC studios that were open to the public, Rockefeller Center. You could stand up on this little platform and look at yourself in TV. But people were absolutely fascinated. And there was one man there who acted as though he was giving a speech. And I knew that we were in trouble. TV was most exciting to people. Their faces, it was amazing.
Got up the hill, and here comes John behind this sled with the dead man's in there. And we shoot our picture, and they start cursing us, and then look across, and there's a guy with a movie camera. No newsreel man's going to be up there. You know, they couldn't afford to go up there and so forth. So I asked him where he was, and then he said it's from CBS television. That definitely destroyed me. I thought nobody's supposed to be around there except maybe some other magazine, but nobody like that. Well, what do you got in the camera? Film. You know, I said, where are you going to send? New York. Be there tonight. When are you going to be on the air? Well, night tomorrow morning. I'm going to be there 4 days later. They got the edge on me, you see. We're out of the news business, as far as I'm concerned. And news business where they can beat us.
I think it's a shame to lose life. I hate to lose any periodical or piece of print because I think we need it all, but particularly life. With life, you sat down and you studied the pictures. You could absorb the true meaning of it. You looked at the picture more than once, many times. The magazine lay on a coffee table, and you'd pick it up and re-look at a picture and see something new in it that you hadn't grasped before. You got an inner meaning to it. Television is far too fast a medium for that. The picture is there and gone in a wisp of a second. You don't have a chance to contemplate its true meaning.
I'll never forget the day Life died. I got off the elevator, and I happened to meet Carl Meidens, who said, "Hurry up and come down to the 8th floor auditorium. There's a very important announcement." So I went down, found that the rest of the staff was already there. There was something very solemn about the atmosphere in the room. And while we knew there were problems, we had taken none of them seriously. And then it was announced that with the next issue, Life was finished. It was a sense of shock that I and everyone else in the room had probably never experienced before. It was exactly like a death in the family. When the meeting was over, and it was a brief one, we got up in a state of shock and left the auditorium. No one said anything, except one man who was famous as a wit. And he said, I remember walking in front of him, and he said, "Well, that's the strongest rumor yet." We laughed a little bit, but that was all. And we came back, and we're just stunned for the rest of the day, for some time to come. It was unbelievable. It was our whole, it was our work, our creation, our identity. And it was all over in a...
I had just come from a safari in East Africa, had come back from a camping trip and came into the Norfolk Hotel in Nairobi. First thing I wanted was a newspaper to read what had happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks, because I hadn't talked to anybody. I'd been out in the bush and didn't know what was going on. I got a paper, and there on the front page of this dinky little local Nairobi paper was the story, Life magazine closes. I felt as if I'd been shot.
I could not imagine those typewriters stopping suddenly, and there was no need to answer another letter. There was no need to finish a sentence on a page. When they called him into the office that morning and said, "That's it, Life's finished," people went back, and it was a state of shock, I understand, you know. And I'm happy I wasn't there. I immediately began to think of all my colleagues, who was going to be able to take care of themselves, who was going to be able to readjust. Because Life magazine, to most photographers in those days, was the pinnacle of everything. Once you reached Life, there was nothing beyond Life magazine.
We were like a club. People may have thought we were snobbish about it, but we were good. We got a story, we'd turn it out. We turned it out. Not always the greatest story in the world, but you turned out. They were tremendously professional men. And as professionals, you felt very badly when you saw something that came to an end. But it had to come to an end the minute the satellites came. It was finished.
No, it was well, we were the end of an era. It was the end of our job. That was what it really was. It was the end of all the fun. Well, there wasn't going to be any fun anymore.
When life died, because an editor can be replaced, but life could not have been replaced. I knew that something died which never will be again.
The morning we ended Life announced that we had to close it. I talked to the whole Life staff, and I tried to tell them that I thought what was so special was the feeling that we had for each other. We knew each other better than anyone except our own families. And I thought this was a great gift that we'd all given to each other. And I tried to say that. I said at the end, I'd written this out in advance because I wasn't going to break down and cry or anything. But I wanted to say at the very end, I thank you all for this gift that we so gladly gave to each other. And I got up there and I got to the end of that sentence and I just couldn't say the word gladly. I knew I couldn't get through it. So I want to say it now. I thank the staff for that gift that we so gladly gave to each other. Wonderful place.
The film was made for me because I had decided to leave. I had done better than I ever dreamed I would on Life magazine, but it had taken 10 years of exhausting work out of my life. I left a lot of very good friends, and I think the movie that was made, without my knowing anything about it, bears out some of the closeness that some of us had, and the sense of a common contribution to an enterprise that we all loved and felt enormously proud of.
But now, it's goodbye, and everybody wants to say so.
Susie Newberger. Oh, gracious. Bob Coughlin. Cal Whipple. Ruby Jo Sheehan. Bob Wallace. Some of these names escape me, but not their faces. Seiberling again. And Hobbing. That's Mary Leatherby. Oh, Jesus, the sweet girl. About this point, at Mealy's party, I gave up. I put my head down. That's Lee Thompson, Ed's wife. And I never saw the end of this movie. I just didn't know what it was made of. MacPhail. Herb Breen. Roy Rowan. That's Hobbing. Earl Brown. Peggy. Elliot. Nina. Ray. years later, it's a killer. Joe?
Goodbye, mate.
Well, thanks for showing it again.
Life magazine resumed publication as a monthly in October 1978. On its current editorial staff of 51 are 13 reporters, writers, and editors who worked on the weekly Life. Former Life photographers continue to shoot stories worldwide. In 1986, Life celebrates its 50th year of publication.